The following program is rated 14 plus and may contain coarse language, violence, nudity, mature subject matter, or scenes which may not be suitable for all viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
During the UFC's early days, Evan Tanner is explosive inside the octagon.
Evan's got vicious elbows. He's got great knees. He's trying to finish things off.
Evan is one of those guys that can do pretty much anything that he wants to do, and a very strong mind.
One that compels him to never give up.
He'll be there to the last minute of the last bell.
Evan was definitely not one of those guys that was going to tap. You would have had to beat him to death to get him to quit.
Just don't stop, never stop.
But out of the cage, the angels of Evan's nature.
He just loved books. He wanted more than just fighting.
He was a philosopher, he was a poet.
Begin losing to the devils in his soul.
Evan lost his mind. You would see stacks and stacks and stacks of beer cans.
And I was like, dude, we gotta slow down.
Evan picked up a big knife in the kitchen and was like, what the fuck did you say?
Evan bears all in online postings.
I have this idea, though, that I need to be able to make my voice heard.
It is in failure that a man is forced to truly look at himself and those around him.
But what really happens to end his life?
Former UFC middleweight champion Evan Tanner is dead.
Was this accidental? Was this intentional? I could believe either story.
That question remains a heartbreaking mystery.
I can't. I'm sorry.
When Evan Tanner celebrates winning the UFC's middleweight championship in Las Vegas, it's the end of a journey that begins far away from the bright lights of the Strip in Amarillo, Texas.
It was a tough town, especially back in the 70s and 80s. It's a real Wild West. My name is Dina, and I was Evan's lifelong friend. I think I probably met him in maybe 4th or 5th grade. He was more on the quiet side. He wasn't going to come play cops and robbers. He was on his bike. He was out adventuring. He was just a little bit different.
Being a loner makes Evan a target, but not an easy one.
A few mean kids tried to jump on him behind the dumpsters, and he put it on all 3 of them pretty much at the same time. After about 5th grade, nobody was trying to bully Evan Tanner. And that's kind of, in my mind at least, when the lore of Evan Tanner was born.
In 1987, Evan joins Amarillo Caprock High School's wrestling team. To his friend Dina, Evan is a natural.
He just hit the genetic Powerball with his physique. We started in around 10th grade, and by 11th and 12th grade, he was a back-to-back state champion. By the time the senior year happened, I mean, everybody knew Evan.
He did kind of fall into it, the wrestling part. I'm Wade Golston, Evan's oldest and closest friend. He disappeared after high school, you know, doing different adventures and stuff. He started doing different jobs, laying cable, and then he was a carpenter, a framer, a bouncer at different bars in Amarillo. Amarillo, Texas is a great place to raise families, but it is not some place that Evan wanted to stay. He wanted out of there, and he didn't want to come back.
But Evan does. Returning in 1997 when he discovers a newly founded fight promotion in Amarillo called the USWF.
When it was originally started, it was basically a boxing ring set up in the middle of a rodeo arena. It was gritty, it was raw. It was basically MMA, but it was open palms and not closed fists. It really started being a pretty big deal in Amarillo. Well then, boom, Evan decides he would join the heavyweight tournament.
And he wins the championship, beating 3 opponents in one night. It's the beginning of a new career and Evan's ticket out of Amarillo. The young fighter soon earns a reputation for being an unstoppable force in the cage.
And he would just go in there and chop them down like a tree. They couldn't deal with his knees, submissions and grappling. He was just next level.
He found something that he was kind of good at, and he did it.
I had gone to some matches because I had gone to school with some of the fighters that were fighting. I had a bunch of friends that knew him, and eventually we ended up meeting. My name is Danita Riggert, and I was in a relationship with Evan Tanner for almost 7 years. He was very shy, very quiet. Didn't have a whole lot to say, didn't know what to talk about. It's kind of awkward.
But Danita perseveres and soon discovers the fierce heavyweight fighter is a gentle giant.
He read every night, every day. He just loved books. He loved studying about any kind of subject. He wanted more than just fighting, and fighting kind of stuck with him.
He said, "Oh, I got these tapes." He goes, "Well, it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm teaching myself Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu."
You want to use the kick, first of all. You want to use the kick so that you can close the distance.
He would watch other fighters and study them because he couldn't afford lessons or training. And he decided that that was one way to learn and be self-taught.
Several ways to do that, and I'm going to use my brother Royce.
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu master Rorion Gracie is one of the originators of the UFC, and his family's brand of grappling and submission techniques is the gold standard for young fighters like Evan.
I just don't know how you watch a VCR tape of Royce Gracie and then go do what he does in a real fight.
But Evan does just that, soon traveling to Japan to fight in their pancrase hybrid wrestling, a dangerous mix of fighting techniques that seems to fit Evan's self-taught style.
Evan Tanner, I met him for my last fight in pancrase in Japan. And, you know, we instantly became very friendly with each other. My name is Bas Rutten. I'm a former UFC heavyweight champion and a 3-time King of Pancrase world champion. Evan is one of those guys that he's just a great athlete. His proportions were perfect, long arms, legs. I mean, he could do it all. When a fighter comes in and has certain traits, you immediately know, okay, this guy's going to make it. Watching tapes, that's how he learned. He was a freaking champion by doing that. Think about that. I mean, that's special.
Evan is the first American to win the pancrase tournament for young fighters.
Looking forward to coming back in September. I hope to see you then.
After the fight, we go hard with partying. I'm a little crazy, and I've been known to drink a lot, and Evan just drank whatever I drank. We drank all night long. It was crazy. I remember we came home probably at 7 o'clock in the morning. I didn't want to drink anything, and I saw him standing with one of those half-a-gallon cans of beer, and I go, okay, you just beat me. I bow to you.
That kind of hard partying doesn't seem to present a problem for Evan, as he continues to beat fighters both in Japan and back in the U.S. Then he gets a call from the most notorious MMA promotion in the world.
He was pretty excited about that. I mean, I was so happy. I was just like, okay, you're going to bigger and greater things.
Evan joins the UFC just as a new fighting style is emerging inside the company's infamous octagon. Randy Couture's hybrid of wrestling and grappling,
Look at him move.
and Mark Coleman's ground and pound attacks are revolutionizing the sport. It's not an approach emphasized by Rorion Gracie in the VHS tapes that shaped Evan's fighting style.
It's time!
Still, on January 8th, 1999, Evan makes his debut at UFC 18 in Kenner, Louisiana, facing off against another newcomer, Daryl Golar.
USWF World Champion, making his octagon debut, Evan Tanner.
He goes, anybody that tells you that they're not nervous or scared a little bit going into there, they're lying to you.
Let's get it on! Here we go! Golar and Tanner.
He had a really unorthodox way of fighting. The way he would throw his right hand and step forward was strange, but he was really good. Watching him and Daryl Golar, you knew that when he was getting beat up, you just kind of were waiting for him to really pour it on.
And Tanner fights out of the foul.
And when he poured it on, it was exciting.
Needs a big strength of Tanner. And a left and a right. Now he's got a rear naked. This is trouble. There it is. There's the tap.
Evan Tanner submits Golar 8 minutes in, transforming himself into one of the UFC's most feared new fighters.
He really got good at hitting people with elbows and knees, using the cage.
He had manhandled everybody.
Tanner overwhelming here with just over a minute remaining.
He was just so superior to everybody else that he was competing against.
And he's teeing off. Evan Tanner. Once, twice, and Mario Yamasaki steps in. That's gonna do it.
I never saw Evan lose with my own eyes.
But his friend is talking about in the cage. It's out of the cage where Evan will come up against an opponent with the tenacity to make the no-quit kid from Amarillo finally tap. At UFC 30 on February 23, 2001, the mostly self-taught Evan Tanner earns a title shot against the current light heavyweight champion, 26-year-old Tito Ortiz.
Here we go, Evan Tanner.
But less than 30 seconds into the fight against the Huntington Beach bad boy,
Tito just slammed him.
Evan discovers maybe you can't learn everything from a Gracie how-to VHS tape.
Oh my goodness!
Oh my gosh, I think Evan's knocked out. I'd never seen Evan knocked out. I don't even think I'd ever really seen Evan taken down or anything. He said that's when he realized that once you get up to fight Tito Ortiz, you really have to have people that can take you to an even higher echelon.
Humbled by his loss to Tito, Evan makes a pilgrimage to Gresham, Oregon, hoping to get trained by some of the UFC's most strategic fighters.
What can I tell you about Evan Tanner? He was a very, very interesting guy. I'm Randy Couture, wrestler and mixed martial artist, one of the founding members of Team Quest Mixed Martial Arts Fight Club. Evan came to Oregon to try and find more training partners and a better training environment. There weren't many MMA gyms back then. You know, the Lion's Den, Militich Fighting Systems, Team Quest, we were really the only ones, and it was a very new thing. Evan showed up at Team Quest. We didn't know he was coming.
And it was like, where are you staying? Where are you gonna live? And I don't know, you know, and I was like, well, we got a trailer that we can move to the back of the lot. My name's Matt Lindland. I was the #1 middleweight in the world for a number of years. Evan and I trained together at Team Quest. He was just like kind of an awkward individual and honestly a little shy. I can vividly remember he always had a buck. Whether it was Buddhist or some other spiritual religion, but he also read just classic novels.
Like, dude, what are you reading? Oh, I'm reading Moby Dick. I'm part of this book club, these classic books. I get a new one every month. He was just such a loner and kind of just kept to himself.
Along with reading, Evan, an early adopter of the social media site MySpace, also starts writing to express himself online. His posts read like pages from a personal diary.
He kind of had this whole online presence. He put himself out there with all this philosophy and ways to approach life.
Believe in the power of one. It's a motto. Believe that one person can change the world. Your words and actions resonate out eternal.
So I was probably 20 years old, first year university student, a bit misdirected. And when I found Evan's MySpace page, a lot of what he was sharing resonated. My name is Ian Daw, and I was Evan Tanner's roommate, friend, and training partner. Evan's MySpace page, it was a massive catalog of experiences. He was a poet, for sure.
For Evan, that was his personal contact, I think, through those engagements, because he was such a loner most of the time.
Even though he's now at a training facility, Evan doesn't abandon his habit of self-educating himself.
He was carrying around Judo Gene LaBelle's Encyclopedia of Finishing Holds. And he was studying those finishing holds, and most of the tactics and technique that Evan had at that stage of fighting, he'd learned from that book.
He was this self-trained lone wolf. I got here on my own. I don't need to be a part of something. But to be the best in the world, you have to have a team. You have to have a coach. I mean, there's a lot of things you need to be successful in this sport. You got to have a strong mind. You got to have a healthy body. You got to have skills, and you got to have a desire to win.
In the gym, Evan comes alive. Lindland and Couture discover the shy young fighter is an eager student.
He was a great workout partner. Very technical, very physical, very athletic. He was a workhorse.
He knew how to use his strike, his hands, his elbows, his knees.
Bro, get off your knees,
Nice, Evan.
When he tied that together with learning to develop his wrestling, I think that made him more of a complete fighter and helped me become a better fighter.
You could have sold popcorn to those workouts. It was amazing.
Outside of the gym, Couture discovers how alcohol can transform Evan. In some ways, for the better.
Most of the time, he was very stoic. He kept himself pretty guarded, but when he had a couple beers in him, the veil would come down and we'd see that gregarious side of him and that fun and loving side of him.
I think he just felt maybe more relatable, more connected with people when he was drinking.
There was an occasion or two where he showed up to practice smelling like he'd been drinking, which is just a no-go. And I remember talking to him once about that. You know, it's just not a good idea to come to practice that way. But he was also very respectful and said, you know, you're right. It didn't happen again as far as I know.
But on MySpace, Evan reveals his drinking continues, whether Couture notices or not.
I've only trained for a month or two at a time when I sign a fight. Sometimes I've put down the alcohol, sometimes I haven't. I keep having this idea of what I could do, what I could be if I put the vices aside and dedicated myself to the sport. At the time, I was struggling with drinking too much and not taking care of myself. Evan's MySpace page was a lighthouse through the storm.
Evan's on-again, off-again commitment to stay off alcohol pretends other commitment problems.
He wasn't really big on telling me that I was his girlfriend. He would really never say, I love you, or that he really cared for me. That was not his thing. When he decided to move to Oregon, I think he felt the need to propose so that I didn't stay behind. When he did ask me to marry him, I said yes. No hesitation. I was excited. I didn't know really where it'd take us, but I enjoyed just being kind of a free spirit with him, and whatever came around, we did.
Evan used to take off on that motorcycle all the damn time.
One time, Evan had been passing through the Grand Canyon. and he saw a sign that said, "Do not attempt to hike down and back in one day." He loved anything that challenged him, and if it was told to him that he couldn't do it, he would try anyway. On his hike, he ran out of water and was getting really, really thirsty. He found some water bottles on the ground and had to drink random water to get back out.
He believed in testing himself. He pushed his body further probably than anybody I know. You know, he was just all about that, a little bit of that adrenaline.
In November 2001, 8 months after his humiliating loss to Tito Ortiz, Evan is back inside the UFC octagon. This time, with Team Quest now in his corner, Evan Tanner begins mounting a comeback.
Went up to Oregon, joined Team Quest. Those guys are definitely making the difference. I'm coming on strong now. I finally have a team of great guys to work with.
We cornered him. We were there with him on that journey through all of those fights in that stretch and really kind of getting on a run.
Including 2 fights against Phil Baroni, known as the New York Badass.
I remember cornering him for the Baroni fight and the Baroni rematch. That's the first fight I ever bet on in my life. To this day, the only fight I've ever bet on, because I knew Evan Tanner was going to beat his ass in the rematch. And that's exactly what happened.
On February 5th, 2005, Evan steps into a Las Vegas arena to face 27-year-old David Terrell. Many experts see the match as a gift for Terrell.
The UFC thought they were throwing Terrell a bone.
David Terrell was probably favored to win. He was one of the top guys to come out of Cesar Gracie's gym.
Evan comes in and he's got like this samurai haircut going.
I remember seeing Evan walking around the cage and seeing a look on his face of determination. I just knew he was hungry for that win. I kept praying, like, it's going to happen. Let it happen for him.
The winner leaves with the middleweight championship belt. And here we go. High kick over the head and another high kick.
Dave Terrell comes out like a ninja.
He's got a guillotine. He's got it deep.
And Evan just takes it, you know, I don't know, 60, 90 seconds.
Can he survive?
And then Evan just pulls an Evan, uses top-level wrestling.
He's up. Wow, what a job done by Evan Tanner. Evan Tanner is a warrior.
Gets a reverse, gets Terrell up against the cage, and just beats him like a little brother.
Evan Tanner right now is bringing it.
Evan's striking was probably the strength of his fight game. He had some submission skills, but the striking was definitely forefront with Evan.
He's right there. That's it. It's all over. It's all over. Oh, my goodness. It's the middleweight champion of the world.
Winning the middleweight championship title was really joyous for the both of us. And in that moment, I was thinking, yes, it's going to be his turning point in his life where things are going to be better and get better for us and for him.
Everybody kind of stumbles along the way, I think, in life, and you learn as you go, and it's really good to be where I am now. Really happy with that.
Evan Tanner, the UFC middleweight champion.
Congratulations, Evan.
But as Evan stands in the middle of the cage, basking in the glow of his victory, his inner demons wait patiently for their chance to retake center stage.
If he got a beer, he finished it. And then he kept drinking. And I was like, dude, we got to slow down.
He would spend days, weeks drinking, and he had no idea what was going on. He wouldn't know where I was, what I was doing, and it was very scary to watch.
I'm like, you're gonna die. I definitely think that there was a soul in there that was hurting. Being a champion in the ring is a great accomplishment, but it's a crown that fades. The belt didn't make him feel whole. When he realized he just had, 10 pounds around his waist, it didn't bring him joy, it didn't bring him peace.
I felt like he was scared of what it would take to continue to be that champion. He didn't want to disappoint himself. He didn't want to disappoint me.
I think that's when he started really spiraling.
The training went out the window, the eating right went out the window, and it was heartbreaking to see him crumble after such a great accomplishment.
One morning, I remember coming into the house and, you know, there were stacks and stacks and stacks of beer cans. Like there was a whole wall that he'd taken the time to stack all those cans. It literally covered the entire wall.
There wasn't a place on the counter where you could set an empty beer can without 4 or 5 more falling off the counter. That was the first time I was like, wow, okay, this guy does drink a lot. I mean, this is real. There's a problem here.
That problem soon could have dangerous professional repercussions. The UFC schedules Evan to defend his middleweight title against Rich Franklin, a 30-year-old former math teacher coming off a victory against the famed Ken Shamrock.
Rich was the hot thing at that time. That was really, really doing well.
Evan Tanner has the title, and I want a piece of it.
When Evan was preparing for Rich Franklin, he hadn't done the preparation like he had before.
I hadn't seen him for quite some time in the training. He just ghosted.
He hadn't been training. He hadn't been sober long enough. And I was hoping he wouldn't take the Franklin fight, but he had taken it anyway because it was in his contract and he needed to take it.
To make a living, to pay your mortgage, to feed yourself, you take the fight, even if you're not ready.
With Danita ringside praying for a miracle, here we go. Evan steps into the octagon to face Franklin.
Man, Rich Franklin is a beast. It ended up going many, many rounds. And Rich Franklin just picked him apart.
He is taking some shots here right now.
He looked like Pumpkinhead, you know, and his braids were almost like popping off his head, and the head's swelling too much.
Evan was definitely not one of those guys that was going to tap, wasn't going to give up. You would have had to beat him to death to get him to quit. There's no way.
It's all over. They're calling it because of the cut.
That fight was stopped, referee stoppage from cuts in Evan's face.
Evan took it, and he would have kept taking it. If they hadn't stopped it, Evan wouldn't have quit.
And so Evan lost the belt to Rich Franklin.
Wow, look at Evan Tanner's face.
All the blood was very, very scary. I hated seeing his face like that. I remember being at the hospital and getting stitches and looking at his face going, this is just not worth it. The next day, it didn't even look like Evan. He looked like a totally different person. It was horrific. I really felt like losing that fight tore him down more and more in his spirit.
The higher hopes and expectations, the deeper the disappointment one feels in failure. It is in failure that a man is forced to truly look at himself and those around him.
If Evan practices what he preaches on MySpace, what he'll see when he truly looks at himself is a man being brought down by alcohol.
His skin would start to look yellow, like jaundice, and sometimes gray pale, like he wasn't getting good blood circulation. He had seen some doctors about his health declining, and they kept telling him that he had to stop drinking or it would cause severe problems for him.
And not just for him. Evan's drinking is also causing problems for his teammates.
There were gym contracts and all those sort of things involved, and after he won the title, he felt like, well, I don't need to do all that. I'm bringing a lot of notoriety to the gym. I shouldn't have to do all that stuff.
He didn't want people to hold him accountable. So it was just easier to leave.
And that was kind of the parting of the ways with Team Quest and Evan.
When somebody just bounces, it's disappointing. I mean, we were friends and we were teammates, so it kind of hurts you. You're like, well, I've been here for you.
Still reeling from his brutal loss to Franklin, Evan is scheduled to fight Canadian David Loiseau. With Team Quest no longer in his corner, Evan decides to train in Las Vegas where the fight is being held, and to do it alone.
He had decided that he needed a change of scenery to help him get healthier. When he got there, I didn't hear from him for over 3 weeks. He wouldn't return phone calls, text messages, things like that. I was pretty upset and mad at him for no communication. I had no idea where he was at, what he was doing.
But 2 weeks before the fight, Donita gets a call.
Please, I need you. I need your support. I can't do this without you. And I did. I jumped on a plane. I went out to Vegas, and he was in bad shape. He was nowhere near ready for a fight. And I told him, you can't do this. You can't fight. And he said, no, I have to. I'm ready. I can do it. I went to the fight. And I really wanted to walk away because it was so devastating for me to watch him throw it away like that.
In Vegas, Evan gambles with more than just his health.
After fights, Evan, especially if they were at a casino, he'd celebrate a loss by drinking and gambling. And I remember a particular fight that he cashed his check at the casino, and I think he spent over half of that check at the tables. He would waste all of our money. We wouldn't be able to pay bills, and it would be frustrating when he would be spending a lot of money that we didn't have.
It's a tumultuous year for the couple, and by December of 2005, Donita is ready to throw in the towel.
It was nothing but drinking. He struggled with eating. He couldn't keep things down. It'd make him really sick. He just kept thinking that he can sober up and he'll make things better with me when he's sober. But I knew deep in my heart he wouldn't. The day I moved out of our house, he was so intoxicated he did not know I had even left.
That hurt him more than anybody will know. I had to talk him out of taking that engagement ring and smashing it with a hammer.
Donita left him, and Evan gave me a phone call. He was like, hey, do you want to get some, you want to go drink? I was like, yeah, dude, I'm 21, let's have fun. At the time, another MMA fighter was living with me, and we started drinking with him. We ended up in the kitchen, and I remember we started talking about Donita, and that was like a really sore subject, you could tell. What I understood from the story that Evan told me was that he shot a gun into the garage, like into the floor of the garage, and he thought it was hilarious. And Donita was really upset. She thought he killed himself, and she didn't want to be around that kind of stuff. His buddy of mine says, forget about her, she's a whore. And Evan lost his mind. Evan picked up a big knife in the kitchen and was like, what the fuck did you say? Like serious, like shaking almost. It was like, oh shit. And I remember getting in Evan's face. I just got kind of aggressive and yelling like, hey, put that the F down, man. What are you doing? Put it down. And I hear the knife drop and we start fighting, like physically fist fighting. And he's like, Maliki, I like you, but you gotta get the fuck out of here.
With Donita gone, an isolated and depressed Evan shares his anguish on his MySpace page, leaving friends and family terrified about what he'll do next.
I'm so far gone, living on the road, drinking myself into oblivion, that in moments of weakness, I wonder if I can make it back.
October 1st, 2007. I'm setting a date. I've been drinking like a madman for 15 years. I am done with it. It has ruined my career. It has ruined my health. I have lost the respect of my peers. I have lost the woman that I loved. I have gambled and drunk away hundreds of thousands of dollars. I am setting a date. And on that date, I will stop drinking. That will be the day I begin to be a better man.
He went through several days of withdrawal. I mean, bad. And that's very dangerous to do. A lot of people die doing that, and he just did it. He didn't touch it again. Once he set the date, that was it.
No longer drinking, Evan takes the year off from fighting and reconnects with Ian Daw, whom he first met on MySpace. Now, an IRL friend, Ian witnesses Evan's struggles with sobriety.
I had competed, won my first professional fight, and Evan invited me to come live with him and train. I moved in a couple weeks after Evan had given up drinking cold turkey. A lot of times his feet would swell and sometimes he would shake, but throughout all of that, you know, he focused on his diet, he stayed active, and he stayed in the gym.
You have to lose yourself to find yourself, you know, and losing everything, you find the things that really matter.
As he struggles to get back to championship form, Evan discovers the years of alcohol abuse are a serious roadblock.
I remember one time he had come out of the bathroom and had asked, he's like, can you come here for a second? His pee was thick, like motor oil, and I was just at a loss. He said that he was like a NASCAR vehicle with no engine. So he looked good, but internally he was really struggling.
Then in early 2008, Evan agrees to a UFC fight.
Holy shit, this guy's training to compete against like a top 10 UFC middleweight. It was incredibly concerning.
But not for Evan. After a nearly 2-year absence, Evan believes his return to the octagon will reignite his career.
He really felt there'd be an opportunity for him to pull off an upset.
It's not to be. No longer the dominant fighter he once was. Evan suffers through 2 catastrophic losses in a row.
It was extremely hard to watch. I knew it was just really hard, and I felt so awful for him, especially after he had accomplished what he had set out to. He remained sober, and he got back on the horse. But it was like a shell of himself.
With his career seemingly over, Evan announces his plan to do what he used to do back in Oregon: take off alone on his motorcycle.
He said, hey, I'm going to go into a desert. He told me that he was going to go out there and shoot some guns, clear his mind.
On September 3rd, 2008, Evan arrives in Imperial County, California, and heads alone into the Palo Verde Mountains. He leaves behind a final post that Danita still finds too difficult to read out loud.
I can't. No, I can't do that. I'm sorry. Yeah, that one part I read, I just can't.
I plan on going so deep into the desert that any failure of my equipment could cost me my life.
From deep in the desert, Evan makes a call to his oldest friend.
He goes, I'm surprised I'm getting a signal.
And leaves behind the last clue to what happens next. On an early September day in 2008, Evan Tanner, alone in the desert, makes a cell phone call to his childhood friend.
He called and I said, what are you doing? And he goes, wait, I think I'm dying of thirst. And I was like, what, Evan? And we lost the signal. I kept trying to call him back. I tried and tried to call, and I couldn't get him.
And soon, the world learns that Evan Tanner's trip into the harsh terrain of the Palo Verde Mountains has come to a tragic end.
Ultimate Fighting Championship star Evan Tanner has died. After days of searching for Tanner, his body was found Monday about 2 miles from his campsite.
Just didn't seem real.
Looks like Tanner succumbed to heat exhaustion after his motorcycle ran out of gas in the desert.
He was found so close to his camp because he wouldn't have given up. And I just pray that he didn't suffer too much.
The coroner rules Evan's death is accidental, but others aren't so sure.
Did he do this on purpose? Did he go out into the desert to kill himself? Was he that unhappy? Did the demons catch up with him?
He went to the desert on his motorcycle with a very limited water supply. To me, it sounded like, okay, maybe he just wanted to, spend some time in the desert and not come back. That's how I took it. It's something I really didn't know going into the sport, how wounded a lot of these individuals are that are attracted to the sport. I mean, our coach at Team Quest, Robert Follis, went out in the desert and shot himself. There's a lot of people that are just hurt and they don't know how to heal.
Honestly, I don't see Evan going out there to take his own life. I just don't see Evan being that guy.
I think it's a ego-driven thing where it's like, I think I might die, but you don't actually believe it. Because he's done this a million times with a million other things that were dangerous. So why shouldn't he get through this one? So I do believe that it wasn't a suicide. I believe it was a suicide mission.
He made a mistake and it cost him.
The death of Evan Tanner is as puzzling and troubling as the man himself. An unlikely champion who remained an enigma even to those closest to him.
I think he had so many different personalities that it's really hard to say which Evan is which, because I've seen them all, and there's always the good and bad of all of those sides.
But this warrior poet leaves behind a lasting legacy.
Here's this very, very accomplished athlete that set out through thick or thin, against all odds, to be successful in something that he was passionate about. And that's how I think he'd want to be remembered.
He was a friend, he was a fighter, he was a philosopher.
The world's about our interactions with our fellow humans and what kind of enjoyment that brings us. Not what can you do for me, what can I do for you, basically. Take the world to be a different place, be a cooler place.
We're a small, tight group. We make each other bleed on a daily basis so that we don't bleed in that cage. And he was a brother in arms.
We're ready? It is easy to find the fault in others and dispense blame.
I believe it takes a true man to be able to look within himself objectively and acknowledge his own mistakes and the part he played in the failure.
In an effort to live by my own definition of a man, I attempt to do just that.
You're a person of substance, and look at doubles as a very stylish paperweight for your betting slips. He grabbed one and held it high. Normally 30 quid, but today, because my brother here has just been released from a psychiatric institute and I'm feeling sorry for him, 15 quid for 25. Within 10 minutes, Dell had sold 3. Rodney watched in a mixture of awe and resentment. The executive dream was slipping away, replaced by the familiar grit of the Peckham hustle. Chapter 13, The Road Sweepers Union. As the weeks dragged on, the organizers sold in drips and drabs, but the mountain of debt to the inland revenue remained immovable. The threat of bailiffs was no longer a distant worry. It was a looming shadow that darkened every conversation. Raquel's right, Del, Rodney said one evening, looking defeated. Trigger said they're recruiting down at the depot. Road sweeping. The pay is steady. Del Boy looked like he had been slapped. Road sweeping. Me, Derek Trotter, the man who once had peacocks on his lawn. I'm a trader, Rodney, an entrepreneur. You're a bankrupt entrepreneur. Del, we need money. Real money. Not this time next year money. Del looked around the flat. He saw the peeling wallpaper, the half-empty bottles, and the tired-look in Raquel's eyes. The bravado he had worn like armor for decades was finally starting to rust. I'll help you fill in the form, Rodney offered, his voice softening. Me? Del shouted. I wasn't talking about me. You're the one who needs a job. You're young. You're fit. You can push a broom from here to Lewisham. I'm the managing director. Rodney protested. Exactly. And part of managing a company is diversifying your income streams. Now, go on, get the pen and see if they've got any vacancies for a logistics consultant with his own high-vis vest. The tension in the flat was broken by a knock at the door. It was Trigger. All right, Dave, Trigger said, nodding to Rodney. It's Rodney, Trigger. Yeah, whatever. Del, I heard you were looking for a bit of work. My supervisor says he's got a spot on the night shift. It's mostly quiet. Just you and the broom. Gives you plenty of time to hear the voices. Del Boy closed his eyes. The image of himself in an orange vest, sweeping up kebab wrappers at 3 a.m., was the final indignity. Thanks, Trig, Del said, his voice surprisingly quiet. I'll think about it. After Trigger left, Del sat by the window, looking out at the estate. He thought about the watch, the millions, the Barbados sun. It all felt like a dream someone else had dreamt. Rodney, Del said, his eyes still fixed on the horizon. Did I really tell them to give that 50 grand to charity? You did. Del, you were brilliant. The whole country thinks you're a saint. Del smiled, a small, sad flick of the lips. A saint with no shoes, eh? Well, at least I'm a saint. Say lavi, Rodney. Say lavi. Chapter 14, The Final Word. The interview with Justin was drawing to a close. The high-end office felt even more alien now that the story had been told. The mahogany desk seemed colder, the air purifiers more sterile. Justin adjusted his glasses, scribbling a final note in his leather-bound notebook. It's a fascinating journey, Mr. Trotter, from the heights of sudden wealth to the current situation. But tell me, do you regret it? The watch, the investment, the charity call. Del Boy leaned forward. The gold on his fingers caught the light. He looked at Rodney, then back at Justin. Regret it, Del said, his voice regaining its familiar resonance. Justin, my son, life is like a market stall. Sometimes you're selling silk, and sometimes you're selling scrap. But the point is, you're always in the game. Rodney shifted in his seat, looking at his brother with a mix of exasperation and pride. We had the world in our hands for a minute, Del continued. And yeah, we dropped it. But we're trotters. We're like those little rubber balls you get in the 50p machines. The harder you hit us against the pavement, the higher we bounce. He stood up, smoothing his shimmering suit. I've got a warehouse full of electronic organizers that are going to revolutionize the world of personal management. I've got a managing director who's got more ideas than a patent office, and I've got a family that, well, they're the only thing that's actually worth $6.5 million. Justin stood up, offering his hand. Thank you, Derek. It's been an insight. I'll be in touch. As they walked out of the office and into the cool London air, Rodney turned to Del. So, what now, MD? Del Boy looked at the yellow Capri parked at the curb. It was old, it was battered, but it was theirs. Now, Rodney, Del said, his eyes sparkling with a new scheme. Now we go to the Nag's Head. I think I know a bloke who's looking for 200 slightly water-damaged electronic organizers. He's a Lap's laptop salesman, and I think he's a fan of Ravel. Rodney sighed, shaking his head. You never learn, do you? Learn? Rodney, my boy. If I learned, I'd be bored. Mange tout, Rodney. Mange tout. And as they drove off into the Peckham sunset, the neon sign of the Nag's Head flickered to life, welcoming them back to the only world they truly understood. The end of Volume I. The Sky's the Limit, a Trotter Odyssey. Based on the chronicles of Derek and Rodney Trotter. Chapter 1, The Ghost of Millions Past. The sun used to set differently in Miami. Back then, it wasn't just a celestial body sinking into the horizon. It was a golden coin, a £6.5 million sovereign, being deposited into the vault of the Atlantic. Derek Del Boy Trotter remembered the feel of the silk shirts, the taste of the finest cognac that didn't come from a plastic bottle, and the way people looked at him not as a fly pitcher from Peckham, but as a business mogul. But that was then. Now, the sun was setting over the concrete monoliths of the Nelson Mandela House, and it looked more like a rusty copper, struggling to shine through the smog of South London. Del sat in the back of the yellow three-wheeled Reliant Regal, the engine coughing like a heavy smoker in a winter draft. He watched Rodney, his younger brother, staring out the window with a look of existential dread that had become his permanent expression since the stock market crash. I'll fetch the suitcase from the van, Del muttered, though they weren't going anywhere. It was a reflex, a memory of a time when suitcases meant vacations in Barbados, not hiding from the inland revenue. Rodney, You look like you've just found out the library's run out of books on bird watching, Dell said, trying to inject some of that classic trotter bravado into the stale air of the van. Rodney didn't turn. I'm nervous. Dell, this bloke we're going to see, Justin, is he going to be asking about things? Things? What things? My private life, Cassandra, the hiccups. Dell rolled his eyes, adjusting his sheepskin coat, one of the few relics of his former glory that still fit. He's a professional, Rodney. He's not interested in your bedroom department. Besides, I told you in confidence it stays with me. I'm not going to be telling him about jiffins or what Cassandra wears when she's annoyed with you. You just mentioned them. Rodney hissed, his lanky frame unfolding as he stepped out onto the damp pavement. They were about to enter a world they hadn't visited in years, the world of accountability. The millions were gone, evaporated in a Central American market crash that had been as swift as it was brutal. They had gone from penthouse suites to the old flat in Peckham faster than a falling safe. As they walked toward the office of Justin, the man who would document their success and subsequent transition, Dell felt a pang of nostalgia. He thought of Uncle Albert, who was currently living his best life down on the coast with Elsie Partridge, probably regaling her with tales of during the war for the 10,000th time. He thought of Raquel and little Damien. Life had been a carousel, and right now, the music had stopped, and they were stuck on the wooden horse that had lost its legs. Chapter 2. The Inquisition of a Trader. The office was clinical. It smelled of floor wax and broken dreams. Justin sat behind a desk that probably cost more than those entire current inventory of digital watches. I've got the basic details, Justin said, peering over spectacles that made him look like a very judgmental owl. But I want the real you, the raison d'etre. Dell leaned back, crossing his legs. Laboratory Garney. Exactly. Rodney winced. He means reason for being. Dell. Whatever. Dell waved a hand. Where shall I start? Well, we were ordinary blokes until I found that watch, the Harrison Lesser watch, a masterpiece, a national treasure, which you flogged, Justin noted. We preferred the term privatized for personal gain, Dell corrected smoothly. 6.5 million quid. We divvied it up. Made sure Uncle Albert had a nice drink, a very large one, and then we thought of the future. We went to a stockbroker, Vibrant Ventures, Central American markets. We were making money faster than the Royal Mint. As Dell spoke, the narrative in his head was a technicolor epic. In reality, it had been a blur of champagne, bad investments, and a helicopter ride to Nice that had cost as much as a small house just to pick up some magazines. And then Justin prompted. Then Rodney took over, his voice dropping an octave. The negotiations collapsed. The market didn't just dip. It ceased to exist. We paid for the hotel on a credit card that was withdrawn while we were still at the breakfast buffet. We were in a financial wilderness. Dell nodded solemnly, but I'm a creative businessman. I found a solution. The solution had involved a hasty exit, a lot of explaining to people in suits, and the realization that their old friends back in Peckham were the only ones who wouldn't turn their backs mostly, because some of them, like Mike from the Nag's Head, had lost their own life savings in the same venture. Poor Mike, Dell sighed, remortgaged the pub. Now he's in the nick, awaiting trial. The fraud squad thinks he was embezzling. Never was a man more innocent. He confessed. Dell, Rodney reminded him. A minor detail, he's a martyr to the cause of independent trading. Chapter 3, The Witnesses of Peckham. While Dell and Rodney were being interrogated by the ghost of their financial past, the Nag's Head was hosting a summit of a different kind. Denzel, the driver whose nerves were as frayed as a cheap rug, was pacing the floor. Sid, the landlord pro tem, who cooked eggs that could be used as lethal projectiles, was polishing a glass with a rag that hadn't seen a washing machine since the Thatcher era. And then there was Trigger. Trigger stood by the bar, staring at a pint of bitter as if it contained the secrets of the universe. I'm worried, Denzel said, his voice trembling. I've never been a character witness before. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I tell the truth? If you tell the truth, Sid grunted, Dell and Rodney will be sharing a cell with Mike before the sun goes down. I hear voices, Trigger said suddenly. The pub went silent. Denzel stopped pacing. What did you say? Trig. I hear voices. I'm going to tell the judge. Maybe they'll let me off. Trig, Sid sighed. You're not the one on trial. You're a witness. I know, but I still hear them. Mostly they tell me to buy a new broom, but I like the one I've got. It's had 17 new heads and 14 new handles. The logic of Peckham was a strange, circular thing. It was a place where bankruptcy wasn't a failure, but a temporary setback, a hiccup in the grand scheme of becoming millionaires, this time next NCM. But today was different. The inland revenue is circling. The Trotter empire consisting of a flat, a van, and a collection of suspiciously branded electronics was under siege. Chapter 4, A Wrong Turn at the Graveyard. The news of Uncle Albert's passing had hit them like a physical blow, or rather, the news of an Albert's passing. In the chaotic aftermath of the court case where Dell had been declared bankrupt and Rodney had been exonerated, mostly because the judge didn't think he was capable of masterminding a bake sale, let alone a multi-million-pound fraud, the family gathered to pay their respects. They stood in a quiet, leafy cemetery. Dell, Rodney, Raquel, Cassandra, and young Damien, who was currently trying to see if he could trigger a car alarm with his mind. I feel bad, Dell whispered, his eyes moist, leaving him down there on the coast while we were off globetrotting. We should have taken him to Barbados. He didn't have a passport. Rodney reminded him. The man survived the Battle of the Baltic, but he couldn't navigate a post office application form. They approached the morning party. A woman named Marion was crying. A man named Roland looked grim. Derek and Rodney Trotter, Dell introduced them, shaking hands with a somber gravity. His nephews, from Peckham. Oh, Marion sobbed. He went on a bit, didn't he? Lovely old man. But the stories. We love them. Dell insisted. The wartime sagas. The individual struggle for liberty. A lot of blokes lost their lives, so prats like Roland here could have the freedom to knock him. Roland looked confused. I didn't knock him. I just said he was a bit of a bore. How dare you? Dell shouted, his grief turning into a righteous fury. He was a hero. He was. Wait, why did you call him Bunny? Roland blinked, because that was his name in the RAF. Bunny Warren. The silence that followed was heavy. Rodney looked at the headstone, then at the coffin, then back at Dell. Dell, Rodney whispered, our Uncle Albert was in the Navy, and his name was Trotter. Dell looked at the grieving family. He looked at the Spitfire-shaped floral arrangement. Is that a Spitfire, Dad? Damien asked loudly. Ooh, Dell winced, the realization sinking in. We're at the wrong funeral. Run, Rodney suggested. Run, Dell agreed. Chapter 5, New Management, Old Tricks. Back at Nelson Mandela House, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of Raquel's cooking and the crushing weight of a $48,750 pounds tax bill, plus interest. They'll take the flat, Dell, Raquel said, her voice steady, but her eyes worried. They'll auction it for 1/3 of its price. Dell sat at the table, his mind working at the speed of a card shark's hands. No, they won't. I'm a trader. I've been trading since I was 12. I could sell rice to the Chinese. The firm's liquidated, Dell, Rodney said, leaning against the doorframe. You're disqualified from running it. It's over. Not necessarily. Dell smirched. The firm can go on. It just needs a new managing director. Someone young, enthusiastic, someone full of ideas. Someone. He looked at Rodney. Rodney pointed to himself. The Wabbi, you want me to run Trotter's Independent Traders? Think about it, Rodney. Legally, there's nothing stopping you. You're clean, mostly. We go to the lawyer. We make you the MD. Rodney Trotter, managing director, has a ring to it, doesn't it? And so the transition began. The Peckham Echoes soon carried a small advertisement. Trotter's Independent Traders, now under new management. Managing Director, Rodney Trotter. Consultancy and party planning. In the Nag's Head, Boyke read the ad and nearly choked on his large cognac. Managing Director, Rodney, I've seen better management in a monkey house. But for the Trotters, it was a spark of hope. Rodney took to the role with a terrifying level of sincerity. He started listening to Mozart's Symphony No. 38 to ease his executive stress. He demanded that Cassandra answer the phone with a professional voice. Trotter's independent traders, how may I help you? Cassandra sighed into the receiver one evening, looking at Rodney, who was wearing a suit that was slightly too large for him. Yes, this is he, Rodney said, taking the phone with a flourish. Managing Director Rodney Trotter speaking. His face went pale. He looked at Dell. It's the representative of the Sultan of Brunei. Dell nearly fell off his chair. The Sultan, tell him we don't do windows on Fridays. He wants to consult with me, Rodney whispered. He bought a 3-wheeled van and wants to know how to start it on cold mornings. Dell's face dropped. Nicky Pierce, I'm going to kill that boy. Chapter 6, Fantasy Therapy and Failed Gambles. The stress of the bankruptcy and the new management was taking its toll on the brothers' relationships. Cassandra and Rodney were trying for a baby, but the hiccups remained. It's memory baggage, Rodney explained to Cassandra as they sat in a quiet restaurant. He had been reading a West Coast American magazine. Fantasy Therapy. We become different people. Reborn. Iconoclastic auto-suggestion. Does this involve dressing up, Rodney? Cassandra asked, her suspicion piqued. Absolutely not. It's all up here. He tapped his temple. We create a make-believe world. An hour later, they were back at the flat. Rodney was wearing a gladiator outfit he'd found in a bargain bin at a costume shop, and Cassandra was dressed as a policewoman. You look scary, darling, Dell said, walking into the living room and freezing. He looked at Rodney. And you look like Spartacus with piles. It's a fancy dress party, Dell, Rodney yelled, trying to hide behind a Roman shield. We're going to a bank party. At 5 p.m, Dell asked, reaching for a cigar. Well, you better hurry. Don't want to be late for the Centurion meeting. But Dell had his own plans. He had applied for a new game show, a show that promised to change their lives, a show called Gold Rush. Chapter 7, The Gold Rush. The lights of the BBC studio were blinding. Jonathan Ross stood center stage, his suit sharper than a razor blade. And finally, Jonathan announced to the cheering crowd, we have Derek Trotter from Peckham, a businessman who enjoys fine wines, the theater, and 16th century Italian Renaissance art. Dell stood there, a vision in a velvet blazer, waving to the cameras as if he were royalty. Back in the flat, Rodney, Cassandra, and Raquel watched the screen in stunned silence. He's going to do it, Raquel whispered. He's actually going to do it. Dell breezed through the early rounds. He knew that Kilimanjaro was in Africa. He knew that Fuji made cameras. He was on a roll. He was on the Rainbow Road. The 50,000 pounds question, Derek, Jonathan said, the music turning tens. Which classical guitarist wrote the opera The Child and the Enchantment? Was it Ravel, Segovia, or Rodrigo? Del hesitated. His fine art knowledge was largely based on things he'd seen on the back of biscuit tins. I'll use my AOS, Del said. I'll call my brother, Rodney. He's a scholar. He's got to GCEs. The phone rang in the flat. Rodney picked it up, thinking it was Mickey Pierce playing another prank. Piss off, Mickey, Rodney shouted. Rodney, it's Jonathan Ross. Dill's voice came through, frantic. I need the answer, the opera, Ravel, Segovia, or Rodrigo. Rodney froze. The pressure was immense. Ravel. It's Ravel. Del. 100%. He says Ravel. Del told the studio. The audience held its breath. Jonathan Ross looked at the card. I'm sorry, Derek. That was the wrong answer. It was Rodrigo. The silence in the flat was deafening. Dill's face on the screen went from golden hope to gray despair. He had lost everything. Again. Chapter 8, The Final Twist. Del returned to the flat late that night, his velvet blazer looking limp. I was so certain, Rodney moaned, head in his hands. I could have sworn it was Ravel. Ravel makes shoes, you dipstick. Del snapped, though his heart wasn't in it. You've upset Raquel. You've upset the nation. I'm going to be the most embarrassed man in Britain. Just then, the phone rang. Don't answer it, Del said. It'll be Mickey Pierce. I'll get it, Raquel said. She picked it up, listened for a moment, and her eyes went wide. Del, it's the producer of Gold Rush. Del took the phone, his expression cynical. Yeah. What do you want? The podium. I'll pay for the damage when I'm back on my feet. Then he stopped. He listened. His eyes began to twinkle. No, really, a mistake. It was Ravel. He looked at Rodney. He looked at the family. He says there was a mistake in the research. Ravel did write it. I can take the 50,000 pounds and come back for the final. The room erupted. Rodney jumped up, knocking over a lamp. Raquel hugged Del. I knew it, Rodney shouted. I knew my GCEs wouldn't let me down. Del laughed, a sound of pure, unadulterated Peckham joy. He looked out the window at the dark towers of the estate. See, Rodney, what did I tell you? This time next NCM, we really will be millionaires. Chapter 9, The Verification of a Miracle. The morning after the phone call from the BBC felt different. Usually, the sunrise over Peckham was greeted by the screech of a distant police siren or the aggressive rattling of a neighbor's milk bottles. But today, for Derek Trotter, the light filtered through the thin curtains of Nelson Mandela House like a celestial spotlight. Raquel, where's my good tie? Del shouted from the bedroom, the sound muffled by a mouthful of toothpaste. The one with the silk weave. I can't go back to Television Center looking like a casual laborer. Raquel walked in, holding a steaming mug of tea and looking more skeptical than a tax inspector at an offshore bank. Del, are you sure this wasn't a prank? You know what Mickey Pierce is like. He once convinced Denzel he'd won a trip to space. Del paused his frantic search through a drawer full of mismatched socks and knockoff watches. Mickey Pierce doesn't have the vocal range of a BBC producer, Raquel. This was official. He said the researchers got their knickers in a twist. Ravel wrote the music, and apparently, the opera l'enfant at Les Sortileges is his masterpiece. Rodney was right for once in his life. God knows how, but he was right. Rodney appeared in the doorway, already dressed in his managing director suit, which still smelled faintly of mothballs. I told you, Del, I studied the French Impressionists for my GCE. Well, I read the back of an album cover in a charity shop. But it counts. My executive intuition is back online. Yeah, well, don't get too big for your boots, Rogers. Del snorted, finally finding his tie under a pile of independent tax forms. One correct answer doesn't make you Einstein. Now, we need to verify this. If I turn up at the studio and it is Mickey Pierce, I'll have to move to the coast just to escape the shame. The verification process involved a tense 20 minutes on the phone. Del spoke in his most cultured voice, the one he usually reserved for wine waiters and debt collectors. By the time he hung up, he was beaming. It's on. Prove. Next Thursday, the grand final. 100,000 pounds is back on the table. But as the initial euphoria began to settle, a shadow passed over the room. It was the shadow of a very large, very persistent debt. Del, Rodney said quietly, looking at the mountain of paperwork on the sideboard. 50,000 covers the inland revenue. But if you win the 100, that's the house. That's a new life for Damien. That's Cassandra and me finally getting our own place. Del nodded, his expression uncharacteristically serious. I know, Rodney, this isn't just about trading anymore. It's about survival. We've been up and we've been down. But this time, we're playing for the championship. Chapter 10, Executive Stress and the Nag's Head Summit. The news of Dill's reprieve spread through Peckham like a wildfire in a firework factory. By the time the brothers arrived at the Nag's Head that evening, the celebration was already in full swing despite the fact that they hadn't actually won the final yet. Oi, here he is. Boykie's voice cut through the smoke and the clinking of glasses. He was leaning against the bar, his wife Marlene looking spectacular in a leopard print coat that probably cost more than the Trotter's van. The man who knew more than the BBC, or rather, the man whose brother stumbled upon the truth by accident. It wasn't an accident. Boykie, Rodney insisted, adjusted his glasses. It was a calculated retrieval of stored knowledge. Retrieval. Boykie laughed. A dry, wheezing sound. I've heard you retrieve information before, Rodney. Like the time you told us the Great Wall of China was built to keep the Scots out. That was a long time ago. Rodney snapped. Leave him alone, Boyke, Marlene said, leaning over to peck Del on the cheek. I'm proud of you. Del, you've had a rough time of it lately. If anyone deserves a bit of luck, it's you lot. Del ordered a round of succulent drinks, mostly pineapple juice, for himself as he was in training for the final. Thanks, Marlene. It's been a long road, but the tide is turning. I can feel it in my bones. It's like the changing of the seasons and the tides of the sea. You sound like a bad Hallmark card, Del. Sid grumbled from behind the bar. Just make sure you don't kick the podium over this time. The BBC sent me a letter asking for your address to bill you for repairs. Tell them I've moved to the Sultan of Brunei's palace. Del winked. Trigger wandered over, holding a pint of bitter and looking more confused than usual. All right, Del, I heard you're going back on the telly. Are you going to be on the bill? I like the one with the sirens. No, Trig, the quiz show. Gold Rush. Oh, well, if you see that Jonathan Ross, tell him I hear voices. He might give me a job in the audience. As the night wore on, the weight of expectation began to press down on Del. It wasn't just the money. It was the pride. The Trotter name had been dragged through the bankruptcy courts. They had been the laughingstock of the estate. Winning this wasn't just about the cash. It was about the comeback. You okay, Del? Rodney asked as they walked back to the van later that night. Yeah, Rodney. Just thinking. We've had a lot of this time next year's, haven't we? This might actually be the one. It will be, Del. Just don't mention King Edward when they ask about potatoes this time. Chapter 11, The Final Countdown. The week leading up to the final was a blur of executive preparation. Rodney had taken his role as managing director to heart, creating a revision schedule for Del that involved everything from the history of the Ottoman Empire to the chemical composition of a digestive biscuit. Rodney, I'm a trader, not a university professor, Del complained, throwing a book on Greek mythology onto the sofa. I don't need to know who the god of thunder was. I just need to know how to spot a bargain. Knowledge is power, Del, Rodney replied, pacing the room with a clipboard. If they ask you a question about the Parthenon, you can't just say it's a Greek restaurant in Streatham. Meanwhile, Cassandra and Raquel were dealing with their own executive stress. I'm worried about them, Raquel, Cassandra whispered as they sat in the kitchen, watching the brothers argue in the living room. Rodney's so focused on this managing director thing, he's starting to believe his own hype. And Del looks tired. Raquel nodded, stirring a pot of stew. He is tired. Cassandra, he's been carrying this family for 30 years. He thinks if he wins this, he can finally rest. But men like Del don't know how to rest. They just find a bigger deal to chase. Thursday arrived with a torrential downpour that seemed to mock the title of the show. There was no gold in the sky over London today, only slate gray clouds. The drive to television center was silent. Rodney gripped the steering wheel of the Capri, which Dell had let him drive for morale purposes, his knuckles white. Dell sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the passing city. "You ready, Dell?" "Ready as I'll ever be, Rodney. Just remember, if I get stuck, I'm calling you. And don't you dare mention Mickey Pierce." The studio was even more intimidating the second time around. The audience was packed, the cameras were buzzing, and Jonathan Ross looked even more polished than before. "Welcome back to Gold Rush," Jonathan announced, the applause echoing in the rafters. "And a very special welcome back to the man of the hour, the man who proved the researchers wrong, Derek Trotter." Dell walked out, his velvet blazer gleaming under the studio lights. He looked at the camera, flashed his most winning smile, and for a moment, the bankruptcy, the tax debt, and the hiccups didn't exist. He was Del Boy. He was the king of Peckham, and he was here to claim his throne. Chapter 12. The 100,000-pound question. The round-by-round progression was a masterclass in Trotter luck. Dell navigated the questions about 16th century art thanks to a tip from a man who sold frames in Lewisham and the history of wine, which he knew by taste, if not by date. By the time he reached the final stage, the tension in the room was palpable. Raquel and Cassandra were clutching each other in the front row. Rodney was standing in the wings, his heart beating like a drum. "This is it, Derek," Jonathan said, the lights dimming until only the gold path was illuminated. "You have 50,000 pounds in the bank. You can walk away now, pay your debts, and live a comfortable life. Or you can answer the final question for 100,000 pounds. The audience was silent. Dell looked at Raquel. He saw the hope in her eyes. He looked at Rodney. He saw the brother who had stood by him through every failed scheme and every empty promise. "I've spent my life walking away from things when they got too hot, Jonathan," Dell said, his voice steady. "But not today. We're trotters. We don't walk. We trade. Let's have the question." The audience erupted. Jonathan Ross waited for the silence to return. "For 100,000 pounds, here is your question. In the world of maritime history, the phrase the ancient mariner refers to a famous poem by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. But what was the specific name of the ship the mariner sailed upon?" The room went cold. Dole's mind raced. Ships, maritime history, Uncle Albert. During the war, he could hear Albert's voice. The stories he'd dismissed as wartime sagas. The hours spent listening to the old man drone on about the sea. "I know this," Dell whispered. "I actually know this." He thought of the wrong funeral for Bunny Warren. He thought of the monogram brandy glass. He thought of the man who had been around the world more times than a Russian satellite. "It's not a trick," Dell muttered to himself. "It's a memory." He looked at the camera. Jonathan. The ship didn't have a name. It was just the ship, but the poem describes it as a specter bark or a ghost ship. However, if you're looking for the name of the vessel that Coleridge based the story on, it was a ship called the Fortune. The silence stretched. Rodney was holding his breath so hard he was turning blue. Jonathan Ross looked at the card. He looked at Dell. He smiled. Derek Trotter, that is absolutely correct. You've won 100,000 pounds. The explosion of noise was deafening. Raquel and Cassandra charged onto the stage. Rodney followed, hugging Dell with a force that nearly knocked both of them over. You did it, Dell. You actually did it. Dell stood in the middle of the chaos, the golden confetti falling around him like rain. He was laughing, crying, and shouting all at once. See, Rodney, what did I tell you? This time next year. No, wait, this year. We're millionaires. Chapter 13, The Morning After the Gold. The return to Peckham was not in a yellow van, but in a chauffeur-driven limousine provided by the BBC. As they pulled up to Nelson Mandela House, a crowd of neighbors had gathered. Denzel was there, Trigger was waving a broom, and even Boyke looked genuinely impressed. But as the party in the flat began to wind down, reality started to creep back in. The check arrives in 30 days, Rodney said, sitting at the kitchen table with a calculator. 50,000 to the Inland Revenue, 10,000 for the legal fees. That leaves us with 40,000. 40,000, Dell asked, pouring a very large cognac. That's a lot of money, Rodney. It's not 6 million, but it's a start. We can move. We can get you that house. Rodney looked at Cassandra. She smiled and shook her head. Dell, she said, taking a seat. We talked about it. Rodney and we don't want to move yet. We want to use the money to restart the firm. Properly this time. No knockoff watches. No exploding dolls. A real consultancy. Dell looked at them, surprised. Restart the firm. Under Rodney's management? Yes, Rodney said, his voice firm. Managing Director Rodney Trotter. But I'm going to need a chairman. Someone with experience. Someone who knows how to close a deal. Dell felt a lump in his throat. He looked at Raquel, who was holding Damien as he slept on the sofa. Chairman Derek Trotter, Dell whispered, I like the sound of that. It's got Laboratory Garney. Ray Sondiater, Dell, Rodney corrected gently. Whatever. They sat in the quiet of the flat, the neon sign of the estate flickering outside. They weren't millionaires anymore. The gold from the studio had already been accounted for by the ghosts of their past mistakes. But for the first time in years, they weren't running. They were standing still, and they were together. You know, Rodney, Dell said, looking at a photo of their mum on the mantel, I think she'd be proud. We kept our promise. We stuck together. Yeah, Dell, we did. But listen, Dell leaned in, his eyes sparking with that old familiar fire. I was talking to the driver of that limo on the way home. He knows a bloke in Croydon who's got a consignment of slightly damp, but perfectly functional, industrial-sized fans. With the summer coming up, we could make a killing. Del, Rodney groaned. No, listen, it's a guaranteed winner this time next year. As the lights of Nelson Mandela House faded into the night, the dream lived on. Because in the world of the trotters, the goalpost might move and the millions might vanish, but the hustle the beautiful, chaotic, hopeful hustle would never die. Chapter 14, The Executive Suite. The new official headquarters of Trotters Independent Traders Phase 2 was, as Rodney put it, a work in progress. In reality, it was still the living room of Nelson Mandela House, but with a few significant alterations. Rodney had insisted on buying a second-hand mahogany desk that was so large it required the removal of the sofa to fit into the corner. It commands respect, Del, Rodney said, adjusting his swivel chair, which squeaked with every movement. When a client walks in, hypothetically speaking, they need to see a man of stature, a man of administration. Del, leaning against the sideboard with a toothpick in his mouth, looked at the desk and then at Rodney. Rodney, you look like a primary school kid who's accidentally wandered into the headmaster's office. And where am I supposed to sit? On the floor. You're the chairman, Del. You're mobile. You're the face of the company in the field. You're the outreach. The outreach? That's a fancy word for the bloke who carries the boxes, isn't it? Del snorted. Anyway, never mind the mahogany. Have you seen the fans? The fans, all 200 of them, were currently occupying the balcony, covered by a suspicious-looking tarp. They were the industrial-sized units Del had mentioned, and they did indeed smell faintly of canal water. We need a marketing strategy, Rodney, Del said, his eyes lighting up. I've been thinking. Trotter's Turbo Chill. It sounds modern. It sounds aerodynamic. Del, we agreed. Proper consultancy. We're not selling damp fans from the balcony. Rodney slammed his hand on the desk, only to wince as a splinter caught his palm. We're supposed to be advising businesses on efficiency and growth. And what's more efficient than a workforce that isn't sweating like a glassblower's bottom? Del shot back. I've already made a call. There's a warehouse in Deptford. Their air conditioning has gone caput, and the foreman is a bloke I know called Greasy George. He's desperate. Rodney sighed, the managing director's facade cracking slightly. Greasy George, does he have a legitimate business license? He's got a van and a clipboard, Rodney. In Peckham, that's a conglomerate. Come on, put your executive suit on. We're going to do a deal. Chapter 15, The Great Fan Fiasco. The Deptford warehouse was a corrugated iron oven. Inside, 30 men were moving crates while the air shimmered with heat. Greasy George, a man whose forehead was permanently slick with perspiration, greeted them with the desperation of a drowning man. Del, thank God. It's 90 degrees in here and the Union is threatening to walk out. George wiped his face with a rag that looked like it had been used to clean an engine. Don't you worry, George, Del said, draping an arm around him. The chairman and the managing director have arrived. Rodney, show him the brochure. Rodney reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper with Trotter's Turbo Chill written in felt tip pen. These are high output, industrial grade circulation units, Mr. George, designed for maximum atmospheric displacement. Will they cool the place down? George asked. Cool it. Del laughed. George, by the time we've got these beauties humming, your blokes will be asking for thermal underwear. They're that powerful. They spent the next 3 hours hauling the fans from the van into the warehouse. As Rodney plugged the first unit in, he looked at the label on the back. It was in a language that looked vaguely Cyrillic. Del, these fans, they're from 1974, and they're marked military surplus. Even better, Rodney, Army quality, built to last. Rodney flipped the switch. There was a low, guttural growl, like a hungry wolf. Then a screech that set every tooth in the warehouse on edge. Suddenly, the fan blades began to spin with terrifying velocity. A blast of air cool, but smelling strongly of old fish and diesel erupted from the unit. See, Del shouted over the noise. Total displacement. Greasy George looked impressed. I'll take the lot. 100 quid each? George, Del sighed, shaking his head. For a friend, want Winnie, and that's because I like your face. They shook on it as the Trotters drove away. Rodney was already doing the math in his head. 24,000 pounds, Del. That's almost. Well, after the cost of the fans, that's a 15,000-pound profit in a single afternoon. Told you, didn't I, Rogers? Del beamed, slapping the dashboard of the Capri. The chairman knows his onions. But then Rodney looked in the rearview mirror. A cloud of black smoke was rising from the Diptford warehouse. Del, why is George's warehouse smoking? It's just the dust, Rodney. The fans are so powerful, they're clearing the decades of grime. It's a cleaning service as well. We should have charged him more. Chapter 16, The Legacy. They didn't go back to the warehouse. They didn't answer the phone for 3 days. Apparently, the military surplus fans had a slight design flaw where the motors would overheat if run for more than 10 minutes, and the turbo chill had eventually turned into a turboflam. Fortunately, Greasy George had managed to douse the small fires with a fire extinguisher before any real damage was done. But the deal was definitely off. At least we got the deposit, Del muttered, sitting on the balcony as the sun set. We had to give it back. Del, Rodney said, standing beside him. and we had to pay for George's eyebrows to be professionally trimmed since the sparks took most of them off. They stood in silence, looking out over the flickering lights of the city. The 40,000 pounds was still in the bank, safe and sound. The Phase 2 office was currently being used by Damien to build a fortress out of cardboard boxes. You know, Rodney, Dell said, his voice soft, we're not millionaires. We're probably never going to be millionaires again. Not the real kind, anyway. I know, Dell. But look at us. We've got the flat. We've got the family. We've even got a managing director who knows how to use a stapler. Dell looked at his brother and smiled. We're the luckiest blokes in Peckham. Rodney looked at the yellow van parked in the lot below. It looked small and battered, but it was there. Yeah, I suppose we are. But listen, Dell said, his eyes beginning to sparkle again. I was talking to a bloke in the pub today. He's got a connection in Singapore. Apparently, there's a surplus of slightly mislabeled, but perfectly edible, canned ham. With Christmas coming up, we could. Dell! No, listen, it's a gold mine. Rodney, this time next year. The argument faded into the night air, a familiar melody that had echoed through the halls of Nelson Mandela House for decades. The millions might have come and gone, and the deals might have sizzled out, but as long as the sun rose over Peckham, the trotters would be there trading, laughing, and dreaming of the next big win. Chapter 17, The Singapore Sling Ham. The mislabeled canned ham arrived in a series of dented crates that smelled faintly of salt air and something Dell insisted was exotic spice. It was a cold Tuesday morning in Peckham, and the living room of Nelson Mandela House had once again been transformed into a temporary warehouse. Look at the branding, Rodney, Dell exclaimed, holding up a tin with a label that depicted a very confused-looking pig wearing a straw hat. Singapore Sling Ham. It sounds sophisticated. It sounds international. Rodney, squinting through his glasses, leaned in to read the fine print. Dell, it says may contain traces of primate. What does that even mean? It means it's high in protein. Rogers, it's for the fitness crowd. And look at the expiration date. It's in a lunar calendar format. It's practically timeless. Rodney sighed, his managing director instinct screaming for a health inspection. We can't sell this. Dell, if a client, and I use that term loosely, eats this and starts swinging from the chandeliers, we'll be back in court before the first course is finished. Don't be so cynical, Dell chided, already reaching for his sheepskin coat. I've got a meeting with Sid at the Nag's Head. He's looking for something unique for the Christmas buffet. This ham is exactly what he needs. It's a talking point. As Dell headed out, briefcase in hand, Rodney remained in the mahogany desk cramped room, staring at the crates. He decided to do some market research, which involved opening a tin. The contents were a strange, shimmering pink, and it wiggled in a way that defied the laws of physics. Traces of primate, Rodney muttered, poking it with a pencil. More like traces of an alien life form. Chapter 18, The Buffet Blitz. The nag's head was decked out in its Christmas finest, which meant a few strands of tinsel that had lost their sparkle in 1982 and a plastic mistletoe hanging dangerously over the dartboard. I'm telling you, Sid, it's a delicacy. Del shouted over the noise of a nearby fruit machine. In Singapore, people queue for blocks to get a taste of this. It's the sling that makes it. It's got a kick. Sid, looking as skeptical as ever, poked a slice of the ham that Del had brought as a sample. It looks like it's trying to move. Del, and why is it glowing under the bar lights? That's the vitamins. Sid, it's bioluminescent. It helps you find your way home after a few pints. Think of the safety benefits. Trigger, who had been listening from the bar, leaned over. I had a cousin who went to Singapore once. He said the ham there was very lively. See, Del pointed at Trigger. Lively. That's exactly the word I was looking for. It's a festive ham, Sid. A ham with personality. Against his better judgment, and possibly lured by the incredibly low price Del was offering, Sid agreed to buy 10 crates for the Nag's Head Christmas party. The party arrived 2 days later. The pub was packed with Peckham's finest. Boyke was there, showing off a new gold watch that Del suspected was actually a repackaged version of his own stock. Marlene was laughing at Denzel's attempts to dance to Last Christmas. The buffet was unveiled. The Singapore sling ham sat at the center, carved into thick, shimmering slices. Try the ham, everyone, Sid shouted, looking a bit nervous. It's exotic. Boyke was the first to take a bite. He chewed slowly, his expression shifting from curiosity to profound confusion. It has a distinctive texture, doesn't it? Very chewy, almost muscular. It's the primate traces. Boyke, Del whispered, leaning in with a wink. Gives you the strength of a silverback. You'll be bench pressing the Capri by morning. For the first hour, the ham was a hit. People loved the glow-in-the-dark aesthetic. But then, as the evening wore on, a strange phenomenon began to occur. Denzel, who had eaten 3 slices, suddenly developed an uncontrollable urge to climb the bar's shelving unit. Denzel, get down from there, Sid yelled. You're knocking the optics over. I can't help it, Sid, Denzel replied, his eyes wide. I just feel agile. Chapter 19, The Monkey Business Conclusion. The Nag's Head Christmas party ended prematurely when Trigger started communicating in a series of complex hoots and hollers, and Marlene found a group of locals trying to swing from the tinsel. Del, take your ham and get out, Sid screamed, handing back the remaining crates. I don't care about the vitamins. I want my pub back to normal. The return to Nelson Mandela House was a somber one. The van was once again filled with crates of lively ham. Well, Dell sighed, sitting at the kitchen table. I suppose we could try the pet shop market. High-protein treats for athletic dogs. Dell, Rodney said, looking exhausted, we are out of the ham business. We are out of the fan business. We are currently just in the waiting for the check business. Dell looked at the crates and then at Rodney. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a single 10. You know, Rodney, I actually tried a bit of it myself earlier. Aside from a sudden interest in bananas, I feel great. Raquel walked in, carrying a tray of tea. Dell, have you seen Damien? He's in his room, but he's managed to build a very impressive rope bridge across the hallway using his bed sheets. Dell and Rodney exchanged a look. 3 for E. Maybe we should hide the ham, Dell, Rodney whispered. Yeah, Dell agreed. Good idea. As they sat in the quiet of the flat, the reality of their phase two began to set in. They weren't millionaires, and their business ventures were currently bordering on the hallucinogenic. But as Dell poured a cognac and Rodney adjusted his executive swivel chair, there was a sense of contentment. You know, Rodney, Dell said, looking at the flickering lights of Peckham, we may not have the 6 million, but we've got stories. And in this life, stories are the only thing that don't go bankrupt. True, Dell, true. But listen, Dell leaned in, his eyes sparking with that eternal flame of the trader. I was reading the paper. Apparently, there's a massive shortage of left-handed screwdrivers in the North. If we could find a supplier. Dell! No, listen, this time next year. The laugh that followed echoed through the flat, a sound of resilience, brotherhood, and the unbreakable spirit of the Trotters. The odyssey continued, one deal at a time. Bon mot. The yellow van might be old, and the engine might cough, but as long as there's a road ahead and a deal to be made, the Trotters will always be driving, because they're not just traders, they're survivors. And in the heart of Peckham, that's the greatest fortune of all. The Peckham Phoenix, a novelization of the Trotter Chronicles. Chapter 1, The Yellow Ghost of Peckham. The yellow three-wheeled Reliant Regal then rattled through the streets of Peckham like a skeletal remains of a decade everyone else had tried to forget. On its side, the faded lettering still defiantly proclaimed, Trotters Independent Traders, New York, Paris, Peckham. It was a lie, of course. They had been to Paris briefly. They had never been to New York, and Peckham was currently trying its best to pretend they didn't exist. Derek Delboy Trotter sat behind the wheel, his rings catching the stray glints of a London sun that looked like it had been filtered through a greasy chip wrapper. He was humming the theme tune to his own life, a melody of seasons changing and tides turning. I'll fetch the suitcase from the van, he muttered to himself, a mantra of the perpetual salesman. Beside him sat Rodney. Rodney, the graduate with TGC's and a brain that was currently a chaotic blender of existential dread and marital anxiety. Rodney was looking at the dashboard as if it were a ticking bomb. "What's up with you, Rodney?" Dell asked, his voice a gravelly mix of concern and irritation. "You look like a man who's just found out his lottery ticket was for last week's draw." "I'm a bit nervous, Dell," Rodney admitted, his voice cracking slightly. "This bloke we're going to see, this Justin, he's a documentary maker, right? He's not going to be asking me anything personal about my private life." Dell swung the van around a corner with the grace of a shopping trolley in a hurricane. "Of course he ain't. We're not that private, are we? We're public figures, the trotters of Nelson Mandela House. But what about, me and Cassandra, our hiccups?" Dell rolled his eyes. "He's not going to want to know about your little problems in the bedroom department, Rodney. Though, strictly speaking, if you're having hiccups in the bedroom, you're probably doing it wrong." "I told you that in confidence," Rodney hissed, his face reddening to the color of a ripe tomato. "And I'm keeping it in confidence," Dell shouted back. "I'm not going to be telling him about jiffins and what